All right, Lee Jenkins wrote the cover story, Sports Illustrated. Michael Jordan's on the cover, turning 50 on Sunday. And Lee goes back to that slam dunk contest in Chicago at the old stadium between Michael and Dominique because I think Mike won it, Dominique was injured, Dominique won it, Mike was injured, and then they were going to go head-to-head here. And it was a home court advantage for Jordan. I thought Dominique Wilkins got robbed there. But Jordan leaves from just inside the foul line, and he got a perfect 50. But Lee said that's probably where we looked at Jordan differently. He became this brand. He became a lot larger than just being a basketball player. And Lee Jenkins joins us now. What was it about that slam dunk contest that you thought elevated Jordan to a different plateau?
Well, Dan, there was a lot of contests. 2 years before when Jordan was in the All-Star game, and I didn't even remember this, but Magic and Isaiah sort of froze him out. There was this feeling like he had all these endorsements, and a lot of veteran players were missing out on that and was kind of nothing more than a showman. I think in a lot of ways, with that All-Star game being in Chicago, the Bulls obviously weren't on the verge of a title yet, but I think it was a chance for the whole country to see what Chicago had seen. It was sort of his coronation, if you will.
But you're also looking at that, and I remember when they froze him out because they looked at him like, we're not going to let him into this fraternity with us.
Yeah.
But did Jordan almost use that as motivation then whenever he played those guys, certainly against Isaiah and company, but even going into an All-Star game?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that he did moving forward. David Falk, his agent, told I thought a great story that I put in the piece is when they got back from Indianapolis after that All-Star game, Jordan had, I guess, turned off his heat, so the pipes had burst in the apartment, and he's just sitting in this freezing apartment going over the game and realizing situations where they didn't pass the ball to him. And I think back then the All-Star game was different. I mean, you just alluded to it about the slam dunk contest. It was more competitive. It obviously didn't mean as much to him as a playoff series or anything like that. But I think in those days, winning the dunk contest, being the MVP of the All-Star game meant more, and it's because of what you said. He was going up against Dominique Wilkins, not Jeremy Evans.
Favorite Jordan story from what you learned covering this?
I like the story. He was sitting in the locker room about an hour before the dunk contest, and Tim Hallam, the Bulls PR guy, came up to him and said, "Hey, do you know what the trophy looks like this year?" And Jordan said, "No, I don't, but you'll find out in a few hours when you're putting it in my car." And so I just thought, the confidence, that swagger that he had, you have a lot of superstars who are kind of insecure about themselves. I think that's part of their greatness. Jordan was completely the opposite.
But the significance of Jordan on the floor or off the floor, what was more impactful, do you think, for the league and the players?
Well, at this point, it feels like off the floor. I mean, it's what's amazing to me, Dan, is you interview guys right now who are coming out of college, okay, who want to be affiliated with Jordan brand, not just Nike, but Jordan-specific brand. And you start thinking about it. These guys were in kindergarten when Jordan won his last title with the shot against the Jazz. It makes no sense. A lot of these players, they don't remember the Fab Five. They don't even know what you're talking about when you bring that up, but they all know Jordan. So to me, the way that legacy, that those accomplishments have lived on in this next generation, it's like in other sports, we can have endless debates about the greatest player ever in baseball and football, but in basketball, it almost seems like it's settled.
Well, and that brings us to LeBron James now. And there's always going to be the next Michael Jordan. We've been waiting for the next Michael Jordan. Kobe's as close as we've come. And now you have LeBron, who I think is a hybrid of Magic and Michael. But is it fair to bring LeBron into the conversation right now with Michael?
Not yet. I mean, we're anticipating a few more championships. I think probably 3 or 4 more until it becomes a serious conversation. And it becomes, at that point, sort of what you appreciate in a basketball player. I mean, so much of LeBron's greatness is his strength, his body, whereas Jordan's was more of that graceful athleticism. But I think if he does rattle off 3 or 4 more, it will become more like the baseball and football argument, where you can argue well both sides, and it won't be this sort of one person hovering over the sport. I mean, there's no doubt LeBron, with those, if he's able to get 3 or 4 more, he'll be right in the conversation.
He's Lee Jenkins, Sports Illustrated senior writer, and Lee not only doing the cover story on Michael Jordan and that slam dunk contest of 1988, but Lee also profiled LeBron James as the Sportsman of the Year, and you spent so much time with him. And I did ask LeBron that night when he was the Sportsman of the Year about what if, and then he showed me his phone, and his screensaver is him against Michael Jordan in what could have happened. It was a photoshopped moment, but Kobe's obsessed with Jordan. Is LeBron obsessed with Jordan?
That was a great moment, Dan, when that happened, because I didn't really think he was. I mean, he wore number 23. I knew we looked up to him as a kid, but in interviews that I'd done with him, he was more likely to talk about Oscar Robertson, more even than Magic or Michael. I mean, I always felt like that was kind of the player sometimes the player you look up to as a kid isn't really the kind of player you emulate when you're an adult, and it felt to me like LeBron more emulated Oscar Robertson. But look, for that generation, for someone who grew up, especially where he did, when he did, there was just nothing like Michael Jordan, and I think those guys are all sort of measuring themselves against him constantly.
And it's also the league. The league hasn't moved on from Jordan in a lot of ways, that they still hold on to that Jordan image and what the feel was like and what he gave the league. And we've had great moments, but it still seems like the NBA stood still for a long time because it was dealing in the aftershocks of Jordan retiring.
No, it did, and you kind of right now this Durant LeBron era, you sort of wonder if it's going to mimic the Jordan era, if LeBron rattles off a few in a row, or if he and Durant are able to trade punches. If then we're going back, hearkening more to the Bird Magic era, and this is just something the NBA seems trapped in. There's this nostalgia about the 80s and 90s where it's always, what part of history are we going to circle back to? And I think that's what's interesting right now. Is it going to be a replay of the 90s with Jordan, or is it going to be a replay of the 80s with Magic and Bird?
But we got passion out of those stars back then, that Bird and Magic respected but didn't like each other. They grew to like each other. Jordan, you got the feeling he would kill anybody, that, he was out there to win. You don't get that feeling. Kobe has that, but with LeBron and Durant, they could seem like they're buddies, best buddies, and I think you have to have a little bit of that, and that's what you probably found out with Jordan. That's the most competitive guy I've ever been around, not just athlete, anywhere, anytime, with his obsession of being great and dominating. I think you miss that sometimes with these guys. They play nice against one another.
No, they are friends. I mean, Durant and LeBron work out together in the off season. I talked to LeBron about Durant. He talks about him like a buddy, but like a motivator, like he's motivating him from afar. So they feel as though, Chris Pauls of the world, who are friends with all these guys, but then on the court can be kind of a killer. They feel as though a switch can be flipped when you cross the lines. But there are other players I've interviewed, Rajon Rondo, for instance, who does not believe that's possible. So I think you still have a guard, a Garnett, Rondo, Kobe, maybe Paul Pierce, who are different in that way. But you're right, Dan, this kind of AAU generation, Paul, LeBron, Dwight Howard, they want to be buddies with everybody off the court, enemies on, and you wonder if that's possible.
Great stuff again, Lee. Did a great job with this. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks for having me, Dan. Take care.
All right, Lee Jenkins, Sports Illustrated, he's a senior writer.